We would have plenty of money were it not for spending over $4 million a day on scrounging immigrants. Pat, I'm assuming that you mean asylum seekers when you say immigrants. Important to make the distinction that these are people who are seeking asylum, statistically, the majority of whom will qualify for refugee status. I think it's important that you understand that the previous government deliberately underfunded the asylum processing system. Many of the people who come to our shores seeking asylum would love to work. And in fact, when you look at immigrants as a whole, consistently they are contributing more than they take from the system. So allowing people to work, contribute to their communities and pay taxes is the best way forward. And the way that you do that is to process their asylum applications in a timely fashion. You can't do that when the asylum system is broken and you have this enormous backlog, which necessitates then people seeking asylum being housed in expensive accommodation. And I also note, Pat, that people like you who are frothing at the mouth about the cost of asylum seekers tend to be curiously silent about the fact that we have just given King Charles a £45 million pay rise. Maybe not the richest man in the country, but certainly one of the richest men in the country has just from our taxes been given a £45 million pay rise. I mean, if you want to talk about scrounging, then maybe that's where we should begin. But thank you for your text anyway.
Hello, and welcome to another Daily Diaries Friday. I'm so glad you could join us today, whether you're tuning in from your living room, catching us on your commute, or maybe even listening in while you take a well-deserved break. No matter where you are, you're part of this community, and that means a lot to us. Whether you're starting your day with a cup of coffee or winding down after a long week, a big, heartfelt shout-out to our amazing Sussex squad. You are the heartbeat of this show, and your energy, your passion, and your curiosity are what keep us going week after week. We're more than just an audience. We're a family that comes together to share, to learn, and to grow. Every Friday, we create a space where everyone's voice matters, and where we can challenge the status quo together. We're here to talk about what matters most, to challenge the usual narratives that we hear every day, and to support each other through thick and thin. It's about lifting each other up, even when the world tries to bring us down. Today, we're diving into a moment that really made me pause and reflect. A moment that made me think deeply about fairness, about justice, and about who we tend to blame when things get tough. Sometimes, it's easier to point fingers than to look for real solutions. We've all felt the pinch at some point. Maybe it's the bills piling up, or the news making us anxious, or just that feeling that things aren't quite right. In those moments, it's natural to look for answers, but sometimes the easy targets aren't the real problem at all. It takes courage to dig deeper, to ask the tough questions, and to challenge the stories we've been told. That's what today's episode is all about, finding the truth beneath the surface. This story starts with a powerful radio exchange, a moment that stopped me in my tracks and reminded me just how much words can matter. Sometimes, a single conversation can flip a tired narrative on its head and open our eyes to a new perspective. It's about questioning the stories we're told, examining who we hold accountable, and refusing to accept things at face value. We owe it to ourselves and to each other to dig deeper and demand better. So today, we'll break down what happened, why it was so brilliant, and what it means for the bigger conversations we all need to have. We'll look at how one moment can spark a much-needed dialogue and inspire us to think differently. Let's get started, because what was said in that radio exchange needs to be heard by everyone. It's time to open our minds, challenge our assumptions, and move forward together as a stronger, more informed community. Picture this. Natasha Devon, a passionate mental health campaigner and respected broadcaster, sits behind the microphone in a bustling radio studio. She's known for her empathy, her sharp mind, and her ability to tackle tough conversations head-on. On this particular day, Natasha is hosting her regular show on LBC Radio, a space where listeners from all walks of life call in to share their stories, frustrations, and hopes. The studio hums with energy as Natasha welcomes callers, her voice calm and inviting. Suddenly, the phone lines light up, and a listener named Pat is put through. Pat's voice trembles with emotion as she begins to speak, her words tumbling out in a rush. Pat is clearly upset, voicing her deep frustration about the state of the country. She blames what she calls scrounging immigrants for the underfunding of schools and hospitals, echoing a narrative that's become all too common in public discourse. This isn't a new story. For years, vulnerable groups have been scapegoated for complex social problems. It's a narrative that's repeated in newspapers, on television, and in everyday conversations, one that simplifies the truth and stokes division. Decade after decade, politicians and media outlets have pushed this idea, playing on people's fears and anxieties. It's easier to blame those who seem different than to confront the real systemic issues at play. Pat's anger is genuine, but it's been carefully redirected, aimed at a target painted by those in power, rather than the true sources of the country's challenges. The media and politicians have a long history of shaping public opinion, often to distract from deeper problems. Natasha listens with patience and compassion, allowing Pat to fully express her feelings. She doesn't interrupt or judge, understanding that only by hearing these views can we begin to challenge and change them. It's in these moments of open dialogue that real change can start. By giving space to these opinions, Natasha creates an opportunity, not just for Pat, but for everyone listening, to reflect and reconsider. Instead of responding with anger or overwhelming Pat with statistics, Natasha chooses a different path. She offers a single devastating fact, one that cuts through the noise and reframes the entire conversation. With poise and clarity, Natasha is about to challenge the narrative, shifting the focus from blame to understanding. Her words have the power to spark a new way of thinking, not just for Pat, but for everyone tuned in. Get ready for a reality check, because sometimes all it takes is one moment of truth to ignite a fire for change. Let's unpack Pat's claim. The scrounging immigrant stereotype is a dangerous myth used to divide communities and distract from real issues. Most immigrants come to work, contribute, and pay taxes, often in jobs others won't do. They're vital to sectors like healthcare, agriculture, and more. Studies show immigrants contribute more in taxes than they take in benefits. The idea that they're a drain on the system is simply false. This myth is a tool to distract from the real causes of economic hardship. It creates scapegoats and lets those with real power avoid scrutiny. It's classic divide and conquer. The real question: who benefits from this narrative? Back in the studio, Natasha Devon doesn't just accept the numbers being thrown around. She takes control of the conversation and turns the narrative on its head. With her trademark confidence, she's not afraid to challenge the status quo, especially when it comes to issues of fairness and public spending. She looks Pat straight in the eye and says, "The King just got a £45 million pay rise." It's a statement that lands with the force of a thunderclap, cutting through the noise and demanding attention. That number doesn't just hang in the air, it electrifies the room. For a moment, everyone is silent, processing the sheer scale of the figure. It's a sum that's hard to comprehend, especially when so many are struggling to make ends meet. Natasha is quick to remind everyone that this isn't just a headline, it's real money, coming directly from taxpayers' pockets. She makes it clear, ordinary people are footing the bill for royal luxury even as they tighten their own belts. And then she delivers the punchline. If we're talking about scrounging, maybe we should start at the top, not with immigrants cleaning hospitals. Her words cut through the stereotypes, shining a light on the people who do essential work for modest pay, while the wealthiest receive even more. The studio erupts into debate, but Natasha stands her ground. Her response isn't just clever, it's a powerful exposure of the double standards at play. She refuses to let the conversation be derailed by scapegoating the vulnerable. Using Pat's own logic, Natasha flips the argument, showing exactly who is really benefiting from public money. She breaks down the numbers, making it impossible to ignore the reality behind the rhetoric. Suddenly, the spotlight shifts. No longer are we talking about struggling families or so-called benefit scroungers. The focus is now on the monarchy's gilded palaces and the vast sums that support them. Natasha reframes the entire debate, moving it away from immigration and towards the deeper issues of class, privilege, and who really holds power in society. She asks the question that lingers in everyone's mind: why are we blaming a fruit picker for society's problems? when the wealthiest family in the country is handed millions without question. It's a true mic drop moment, one that leaves the audience rethinking everything they thought they knew about fairness and public money. Natasha Devon doesn't just win the argument. She delivers a masterclass in challenging prejudice, exposing hypocrisy, and demanding a more honest conversation about who really benefits in Britain today. Natasha's response exposed the double standard in our society. Refugee families are vilified for receiving modest benefits, while the elite's vast public funding is celebrated or ignored. The rules change depending on wealth and power. Natasha's point: why does anger flow downwards, not upwards? Why are we conditioned to punch down, not up? This hypocrisy keeps the public divided and distracted from the real issues. Let's look at the numbers. The sovereign grant gives the royal family a huge slice of public money, over £86 million a year, plus a £45 million boost. This funds luxury, not necessity. Supporters claim it's good for tourism, but it's a massive transfer of wealth to the already rich. Compare that to immigrants, who are net contributors to the economy. Studies show they pay more in taxes than they receive in benefits. They're nurses, engineers, drivers, and entrepreneurs, strengthening the economy. When you compare the two, Pat's argument falls apart. Immigrants fund public services. The monarchy receives millions for luxury, if we care about scrounging. Where should our focus be? Natasha simply pointed to the obvious answer. This episode highlights the tragedy of misdirected anger. People like Pat are struggling, but their anger is channeled at the wrong targets. Political and media narratives teach us to blame immigrants, not the systems of inequality. The real divide isn't about background, it's about who controls the narrative. The powerful use division to hide widening economic gaps. Divide and rule is the oldest trick in the book. Natasha's intervention broke that spell, reminding us the real struggle is between ordinary people and a tiny elite. The anger is justified, but it must be aimed at those who built the system. Let's stop punching sideways and start looking up. The takeaway: question who you're told to blame. When politicians or media target vulnerable groups, ask who benefits from this narrative. Refugees and immigrants don't set tax policy or cut public services. The powerful do. Yet the powerless are blamed for decisions made in boardrooms and government offices. Natasha and Pat's story is a lesson. Redirect your scrutiny. Get as angry about corporate tax evasion as you are about benefit fraud. Demand transparency from the elite, not just the poor. Let's promise to stop falling for distractions and scapegoating the vulnerable. Be brave, ask tough questions, and demand answers from those in power. Thanks for listening, Sussex Squad. Be kind and question everything.